the floor of court. We are now recording. I'm gonna just jump right into my notes. I'm not gonna do too much of a background on Baldwin. We kind of went into that last week. But for me, what stands out most to me when engaging the text is how it starts, right? I have begun this letter 5 times and tore it up 5 times. And that's kind of leads me to believe, right, that this is at least his sixth attempt at writing the text, and this is what we were able to receive. But also, just the intentionality and kind of what Tanai was saying, like the love that he has for his nephew. You see that coming out in his desire to write it, tear it up, write it, tear it up, write it again to make sure that it's perfect, right? Then there's also this element of vulnerability in the sense that in our time, like without a shadow of a doubt, Baldwin is recognized as one of the greatest writers in American history. And just to know that someone at his caliber is still going through the process of writing something and tearing it up and writing it again, just lets you know the process that it goes in to produce something like this, right? And kind of goes back to this idea of being gracious with yourself and allowing for the restarts. Um, then he shifts the focus of the reading to a triangulation he has between his nephew's father, which is his brother, and then his father, which is the nephew's grandfather. And he says you guys are kind of similar physically. Your demeanor is kind of the same. And then he kind of shifts his focus to his father, his nephew's grandfather. And if you know about Baldwin, if you know about Baldwin's work, particularly the book Goat Town on the Mountain, which serves as Baldwin's autobiography of sorts, his father has a very pervasive role in his life. And his father did a phenomenal job of stealing and killing Baldwin's self-esteem. And Baldwin took great issue with that. And you can see the issue that he takes with that in the way that he writes about his father, right? He says, well, he is dead. He never saw you, and he had a terrible life. He was defeated long before he died because, at the bottom of his heart, he really believed what white people said about him, right? So he's realizing that this is the pitfall of his father, right? He succumbed to believing what the white world said about him, and this is why he was defeated. And he offers a warning to his nephew James. You can only be destroyed by believing that you really are what the white world calls a nigger, right? So this is how you would be destroyed, by taking on this idea that you are what the white world ascribes you to, ascribes on you, right? So don't let that be your destruction. And he says, your father went through this as well. He says, I know what the world has done to my brother and how narrowly he has survived it. And I know, which is much worse. And this is the crime of which I accuse my country and my countrymen. And and for which neither I, nor time, nor history will ever forgive. That they have destroyed and are destroying hundreds of thousands of lives and do not know it and do not want to know it. Right? So this is the crime that I'm charging not only my country, but also my countrymen. And he continues, right? I'm charging you with the crime of this destruction of hundreds of thousands of lives. But then the fact that you act like you don't know that you're doing that, or you pretend that you don't even want to know that you're doing that, right? And he says, but it is not permissible. Somebody tell me, what does permissible mean? What does it mean to be permissible? What does that mean? What is?
Allow?
Say it again. Allow, please.
Allowed?
Allow, yes. So it's not allowed, right? It's not permissible that the authors of devastation should also be innocent. It is the innocence which constitutes the crime, okay? So let's unpack that. So it's not allowed that the authors of devastation. Who are the authors of devastation that Baldwin's talking about? Think about what he says before that, right? He says that, for this is the crime which I accuse my country and my countrymen, the destruction of hundreds of thousands of lives. So, who is the authors of destruction or devastation?
Would it be black people?
They're the victims. Those are
Oh,
the
white
lives
people.
that. Thank you, Margie. So the authors of devastation in this context are white folks, right? Because they're destroying, hundreds of thousands of lives. Now, this gets solely to the pillar of white inferiority, right? Because he says it is the innocence which constitutes the crime. It is the innocence which constitutes the crime. What does that mean? What does it mean that the innocence constitutes the crime? Think about the pillar of white inferiority, or one of the pillars.
Is it kind of like they're like not all of them are necessarily like hurting you in a sense of I would say like there you have your like pro segregation like politicians, then you
Okay.
would have some like, oh, it's not my it's not my business.
You're around it, James. You're right there. So what it is that so these ones who are, if we're going to use James's examples, the one we have the pro-segregation and the anti-segregation politicians, right? The anti-segregation politicians may say that I'm innocent. I don't advocate for your segregation. But what Baldwin's saying is you pretending to be innocent is the problem, right? Because you may not pass policy that's going to ensure segregation, but you benefit from segregation, right? You take part in a system that is intended to set certain people here and to set others here. So the problem I have is your need to cling on to this innocence. This is what constitutes the crime. It's the innocence that constitutes the crime. It's the same thing when you have conversations around issues of race with certain white folks, and they'll be like, "Well, I didn't do that. I wasn't even born when that happened." So Bond was like, "Yeah, I get that, right? I'm not holding you accountable for that. But let's not pretend that you're innocent." That's the problem, right? So it's the innocence that constitutes the crime. Again, what is the Baldwinian notion? The Baldwinian pillars of white inferiority, the maintenance of white innocence, and the white imagination, right? And he says, and then here to me, there's a shift that takes place in the reading. And the shift takes place when he talks about his nephew being born. And he says, to be loved, baby, hard, at once and forever, to strengthen you against the loveless world. Remember that. I know how black it looks today for you. It looked bad that day too. Yes, we were trembling. We have not stopped trembling yet. But if we had not loved each other, none of us would have survived. And now you must survive because we love you. And for the sake of your children and your children's children, right? So when I ask, what's the work that love is doing, right? That work that love is doing is a mechanism for survival. Because if it wasn't for love, according to Baldwin, they wouldn't have been able to get young James, his nephew, to get to the point where he's at, right? So love is a survival mechanism. And then love is going to take another metamorphosis towards the end of the reading as well. But then he continues, right? This innocent, again, the pillars of white inferiority, this innocent country set you down in a ghetto in which, in fact, it intended that you should perish. Let me spell out precisely what I mean by that. For the heart of the matter is here, in the root of my dispute with my country. You were born where you were born and faced the future that you faced because you were black and for no other reason. The limits of your ambition were, thus, expected to be set forever. You were born into a society which spelled out for you with brutal clarity in as many ways as possible that you are a worthless human being. You are not expected to aspire to excellence. You're expected to make peace with mediocrity, right? So you live in the Nickerson Garden projects. You live in Jordan Down projects. You live in the jungles simply because you was black, for no other reason. You live in East Los Angeles between Breed and Soto for the reason of you being indigenous, for no other reason. And thus, right, You are supposed to make peace with your mediocrity. You're not supposed to see anything beyond the Nickerson Gardens projects, right? And you're supposed to be at peace with that. You're supposed to be at peace with the limits, your world limits being the 10 freeway, the 110 freeway, and the 105, right? Being at peace with mediocrity. Um, he continues. The details and symbols of your life have been deliberately constructed to make you believe what white people say about you. So there we have the imagination, the white imagination make its introduction, right? The details and symbols the white imagination constructs for you is set there so that you can believe what the white world says about you. So black folks are something to be feared. So we'll pump 24-hour news coverage that would allow you to fear blackness. Black folks are thugs and a threat. So we'll promote movies and music that'll show you that black folks are thugs and threats, right? So that way you believe these things too. And this is where love makes another presence and it kind of shifts. He says, you must accept them and accept them with love. For these innocent people have no other hope. They are, in effect, still trapped in a history that they do not understand. And until they understand it, they cannot be released from it. Right? So again, love as a survival mechanism, right, is now shifting to where we need to love these people who oppress us for their survival, for the survival of humanity, because they're stuck in a history that they don't even understand. So they're acting from this space of lack of understanding, right? Again, it goes back to the question, who would ask that? Gisela asked, the stars being out when the sun comes up. They are understanding black people as inferior, and they cannot wrap their mind around anything else but them being inferior, right? So we as black people must be patient with them, must be persistent with them, and work them through their lack of understanding. This is what he's asking. Keep in mind when this is written, 1963. Keep in mind what's going on during this time. It's the civil rights movement, right? At this time, the civil rights movement is really very much focused on integration and nonviolence. Baldwin is peeping this. Baldwin is a close ally of Martin Luther King. But the other part of this book that you did not read is Baldwin goes to dinner with Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Black Muslims or the Nation of Islam, right? Second in command being Malcolm X. So Baldwin also knows this other side. The Nation of Islam is not with the integration. They're with complete and total separation from the white race, as they say, right? So give us 8 southern states, 8 to 12 southern states. We'll take all the blacks, we'll sit up there, and we'll build our own nation, right? Separation, we don't need it. Black nationalism. So he's seeing these two positions that the black community is taking. He calls this book The Fire Next Time. Does anybody know the story of Noah, the biblical story of Noah? Noah and the ark?
Yes.
You kind of break that down for us real quick, James? Actually, let me do it for the sake of time, I'll go. So, God is displeased with humanity. Humans are on earth fucking up, right? And he gets tired of this. So he tells his homeboy Noah, I'm about to wreck this shit. So what I need you to do, because you're my faithful servant, build an ark. Get your family on this ark, get 2 of each animals on this ark, and I'm going to task you with repopulating the human race, okay? So this is the story of Noah. This is how Baldwin ends the book. Not what you guys read, but the entire book, The Fire Next Time. If we, and now I mean the relatively conscious whites and the relatively conscious blacks, who must, like lovers, insist on or create the consciousness of the other, do not falter in our duty now, we may be able, handful that we are, to end the racial nightmare. and achieve our country and change the history of the world. If we do not now dare everything, the fulfillment of that prophecy, recreated from the Bible, in song by a slave, is upon us. God gave Noah the rainbow sign. No more water, the fire next time. Okay? So God says to Noah, like, yo, build this boat, take your family with this boat, take these animals with this boat, repopulate the earth. But Noah, I'm warning your ass. Y'all fuck this up again, and there's not gonna be no more water. It's gonna be the fire, right? This is how I'm going to purge the earth. So Baldwin is using this metaphor and he's applying this metaphor to America. Yo, I see what's going on with the civil rights struggle. I seen y'all kill Medgar Evers. Y'all going to kill Dr. King, right? Y'all ain't listening to this nonviolent request. On the other side, though, because remember, Baldwin's from New York, right? He's from Harlem. Who else is from New York and from Harlem? Do y'all know? Brother Malcolm. Malcolm X is from Harlem, New York, right? So Baldwin is aware of how the people of New York are listening to the words of Malcolm. And he's telling America, like, yo, if y'all don't take this water warning that the civil rights movement is trying to offer you, Malcolm X and his folks is coming with some other shit that you ain't ready for. It's that fire that's coming next time, right? And those who are abreast of history know that Baldwin's prophecy would prove to be right. We know that in '65, Malcolm would be assassinated 2 years after the production of this book. The next year, after the assassination of Malcolm X in '65, the Black Panther Party of Self-Defense would be birthed in Oakland, California in 1966. And if those familiar with the Black Panther Party knew the temperature of their organizing, it was vastly different from what Martin Luther King was talking about in nonviolence, right? So this is the warning that Baldwin's trying to offer America. In fact, this is where we'll be transitioning as a class this semester. Once we get done with our midterm, we're going to jump into Malcolm, we're going to jump into Martin Luther King and the Black Power era, focusing on Huey P. Newton and Stokely Carmichael. So I'm going to end my notes there. We'll transition into our fishbowl. I know, Paris, you would like the fishbowl. Does anyone else want to volunteer the fishbowl?
Oh, can I go?
Yeah, Kyle, got you.
Can I go too?
Eric, yep. So we'll
Yeah.
have
Can I
Paris.
go?
I'm sorry, there's one more.
Yeah, can I go?
Adam. Okay, cool. Got you. So we'll have four. We'll have Paris, Kyle, Eric, and Adam. Whoever wants to start, it's on you.
I'll start. So for the third question that we talked about in the breakout room, when you said what was our favorite passage, I picked, and this is the crime. Oh, sorry. Let me tell you what page it's on. I think it's on the second or third page. The third.
Okay.
So it says, and this is the crime of which I accuse my country and my countrymen, and for which neither I nor time nor history will ever forgive them. They have destroyed and are destroying hundreds of thousands of lives and do not know it and do not want to know it. So basically, I said this passage really resonated with me because I feel like I connected with it on a deeper level, especially with being Black and reflecting on the way we're treated today. So another reason it resonated with me is because of the encounters not only I've had, but I've seen and heard with people saying things like, talking about slavery, saying like, oh, get over it, or that happened a long time ago and stuff like, it's not like it directly happened to you. But I feel like that's not the point. And that's why I agree when he says they have destroyed and are destroying hundreds of thousands of lives and do not know it and do not want to know it. So basically the ignorance toward slavery is what made me like resonate with that.
Absolutely. Good call out, Paris. Thank you. That's also a great articulation of the maintenance of white innocence. Who's next?
I can go.
I'll go.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Adam can go first.
All right. So I also did number 3. So on page, I believe like 6 or 7,
Okay.
I saw this passage. It says, They have had to believe for many years and for innumerable reasons that black men are inferior to white men. Many of them indeed know better, but as you will discover, many people find it very difficult to act on what they know. So this really stood out to me and really hit me, just because it's so meaningful, and it's basically saying how like the countrymen know better. They know what they're doing is wrong, and like how they're treating these people.
Yeah.
But obviously they're not going to stop if it's in their benefit.
Yeah.
They can understand and know that it is not right to treat African people differently. But till this day, obviously it's happening. So they can know, but it's not like they're going to act on it.
Yeah. Yep. You call it Adam. Thank you. Kyle?
I also did mine on number 3.
Okay.
So the passage that stood out to me was on page 5 to 6. There's no reason for you to try to become like white men, and there's no basis whatever for their impertinent assumption that they must accept you. The really terrible thing, old buddies, that you must accept them, and I mean that very seriously. You must accept them and accept them with love, for these innocent people have no other hope. And then this kind of relates to what I learned from my third literature class, as violence was never the answer. So instead of bickering and like falling apart over whose fault it was, people should come together and mend so they can mend the problem instead.
Okay. Thank you, Kyle. Eric?
So mine, I also did number 3. It was the part where he says, "You must accept them and accept them with love, for these innocent people have no other hope. They are in effect still trapped in a history which they do not understand, and until they understand it, they cannot be released from it." So that part stood out to me because I guess what you would normally think, like, if a black person would grow up and discover how they're treated just because they're black, they would like form like some sort of hatred towards the white men. But in this, Baldwin tells his nephew that what he should do instead is accept them, and that it's not completely all like it is because the white men are treating them like that too, but it's because they have grown too accustomed to what they've been taught by their ancestors that now they believe too that that is how black people should be treated and how they are completely different from them.
Yeah.
But for them to change that, like they would first have to help the white men understand how that is not correct. And by doing that, they would like form like a sort of level between them so they could work things out.
Thank you, guys. I think you guys really did a great job of unpacking the passage. One thing I do want to focus on when we close out, and I'll work it through a question. This idea of black love, right? And Eric tapped on it, Kyle tapped on it. I want to problematize that just a little bit. When he says love, I don't want y'all to think like coming together and making mixed babies type of love. That's not really what Baldwin is up to. He's talking about a love that shows them their faults, right? That shows them who they truly are without keeping them comfortable about it, right? I just need you to strip you down and show you who you are, right? It's the work that love, this is the work that love, this is the type of love, that Baldwin is talking about. So I pose this question because when I think about the dynamics between historically and contemporarily, right? The dynamics between black and white, I liken this to an abusive relationship or a bully, right? And so if you're gonna take the abusive relationship example, there's only a few ways you could deal with the abusive relationship. You leave the relationship, you stay and continue to get abused, fight back, right? This is only ways that I know to deal with that. Bully's the same thing. I don't have any personal experiences with abusive relationship, but I do have some personal experiences with bullying. In my personal experience, the one way to get a bully up off you is to punch that motherfucker in the mouth. That's just my personal experience. Even if you lose that fight, the fact that you fought that individual is going to cause them to think twice about trying to take your lunch money, your shoes, or whatever the case may be. So I say all this to ask you this. Is Baldwin's solution viable? If you are in an abusive relationship, if you are being bullied, right? this idea of accepting them with love, does that work? Is that viable? Is that something that's practical to ask of a people who's being abused? What do y'all think?
I think in essence, maybe no, it's not, but maybe he meant like tough love,
I'm in here.
Yeah, he definitely
you
meant like
know?
a tough love. So even if we say a tough love, right? Is that
Yeah.
still? Do you still think that's viable? Do you still think that's something that's worth trying?
I mean, I think we've already tried that, you know. We've already tried that. So I feel like even till today, I mean, I think our language, the language of the unheard is what, like protesting,
Yep.
you know?
Mhm.
So I mean, I don't find that tough love. I just think I find that in itself like putting things into action.
Okay.
So I don't know how I would classify that.
Okay. And I think that's a great place to transition as we go through the semester. Tonight?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. I wanted to touch on this earlier, so I'm really glad that you didn't close out. But honestly, I think that it plays into what we're taught within our homes. In the Black household, we are taught to love, like, just from what I see in the world, we are taught to love others, including white people, even when
Mhm.
some treat us bad. So I think that notion of love and loving others probably roots deeper than we actually understand. And it has nothing to do with how beneficial it is. It has everything to do with it being within our nature
Mhm.
and being within the nature of our ancestors and carrying like to present day, because we will still see people like, I'm still gonna love you even though you hate me. I believe that was a video not that long ago of a Black man telling a white man, he says, like, I still love you, why do you hate me? And the white man had like broke down and was like, I don't even know. He couldn't even explain the hatred that he had. But I say that to say I don't necessarily think he's writing it because it's a beneficial solution or a viable solution. I think he's writing it because it's within his nature to love the people around him as they are and to want the best for them in terms of understanding others.
I think it's a very profound insight into what Baldwin's up to, right? So maybe it's not about a solution. Maybe it's just about Black nature, right? But also, I know what's part of nature is survival. One may say survival of the fittest, but we can just stop it with survival. Survival is part of nature, and I don't know if this love is leaning towards our survival because, like Margaret said, we've been trying that shit, right? Like this was written in 1963. We're dealing with the same issues in 2021, and I think when I hear this, it makes me think of Botham Jean and Amber Geiger. Does anybody know who Botham Jean and Amber Geiger is? Okay, I'm gonna try to run through this real quick because I know we're running short on time. I want to say at most 2 years ago in Dallas, Texas, there was a white woman officer by the name of Amber Geiger, lived in an apartment complex. I believe she was located, her apartment was on the fourth floor. She goes to the wrong floor, being the fifth floor. She ignores the signs that say what level you're on. She ignores the fact that her apartment doesn't have a mat in front of the apartment, right? She goes to open the door is ajar. She walks in, sees an individual sitting on their couch, watching TV, eating ice cream. Once the individual realizes that his house has been entered, naturally he jumps up. Amber Geiger grabs her firearms, shoots some shots. Botham Jean is dead. Okay, so this is what happens. But now, fast forward to the trial. We're in Texas. It's a Black judge. I'm like, oh shit, okay, this is a little interesting. Let's see how this plans out with the Black judge. They go through the trial. Everyone speaks to what a kind, loving individual Botham Jean was. He was a missionary. His neighbors said every Sunday morning he would wake up singing gospel songs. Just a beautiful human being, right? On the flip side, the defense are saying what type of beautiful, upstanding individual Amber Geiger was. She made a mistake, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Long day on the force, yada, yada. It's time to give the verdict. She's guilty. Like, okay, it's a little different, different outcome. Maybe it's the black judge. So then they released the sentencing, the minimum sentence, the least amount of time she could receive. I believe it was like 5 years. That's not what's interesting. Upon conclusion of the trial, the judge comes off her podium, hands Amber Geiger a Bible, gives her a hug, and tells her, "I'll pray for you." I'm looking at this like, what the fuck? One, not only is that unprofessional, right? That's not your job. I've never seen a judge ever interact with anybody, right? Let alone give them a Bible, give them a hug, and pray for them. Botham Jean's family comes on TV. They ask them how they feel about the outcome. They're pleased with the outcome. They don't want her to serve a long sentence. They love her. They forgive her. The Bible tells them so. And I'm just looking at this like, man, what in my eyes, what a poor output of grief. Of you had your son, your brother, your cousin stolen from you. And you love her and you want the best for her. And you forgive her, right? Like I have a son, I have a brother, I have cousins. That's not in me. I don't know how natural that is. I don't know how well that's serving African people from a standpoint of survival. So if that's not the answer, what is the answer? How do we respond to these constant onslaughts of violence? What do we do? Tomorrow, 4 p.m., there will be a Zoom conversation. I'll be a guest lecturer at Antioch University, talking about the transition from civil rights to Black power, which is going to pick up on some of this conversation. And it's also going to kind of prep you all for what we'll be getting into after our midterm. I'll post the link in the Google Classroom site, and I'll also send out an email to everyone so you'll have that. It's at 4 p.m. You would have to do a journal entry to get the extra credit. Keep in mind also, we will have no readings for next week. I'll send out a midterm study guide tomorrow to you all. And then when we meet next Wednesday, we'll spend the whole day going over that study guide, answering your questions. And then a week from tomorrow, next Thursday, I'll be emailing out your midterms. Are there any questions?